Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm Molly Herford here with co-host Peter Glassford, and today we have proved that it is a very, very small world because we have Ultimate Frisbee coach Scott Hastie on, but it turns out he used to race bikes down at Trexlertown Velodrome, one of my favorite places on earth, and right near where I'm from in New Jersey. So it is indeed a very small world since he's from Ontario. And he chatted with us today about Ultimate Frisbee, which I definitely had some issues with going in, but ended up being pretty into it.
Yeah, Scott's a good friend of one of my clients who recommended him as someone to talk to about Ultimate. Scott has...
Okay, I'm just going to pause and say I'm still not on board with calling it Ultimate.
Okay, well, with Ultimate Frisbee... So we go over sort of his progression through from cycling to Ultimate and what that looked like. We talk about what Ultimate Frisbee is. He gives a really good sort of explanation about that. There's a concept which I had forgotten about from my university and high school. Ultimate play was that there is no referees in Ultimate Frisbee. It's governed by the player, so what they call spirit of the game. Which is a really cool element and one that attracts a lot of people to Ultimate, coming from basketball or soccer where things like the dive, trying to use the rules and sort of fake faults, different, what am I looking for?
Injuries,
fouls. Fouls is the word I'm looking for. So it's just sort of a different twist on that game, and I think, gets to the pure sort of element of sports. So actually I think that's what he was saying draws a lot of people to it. Is people who are, have those basic movement skills from the other team sports like soccer, usually find that quite attractive, and that might be what draws them, or it might be what keeps them once they sort of give it a try at a weekly sort of pick-up co-ed sort of game. So we talk about that. We talk about where to get into it. We talk about how it can progress and how he progressed through the different ranks. And we get into some really cool coaching stuff as well, just sort of what he learned by going outside of his upbringing in Toronto, and he went down to Boston and learned, a whole different way to look at the same game. And I think a good takeaway that a lot of the successful people, including Perry, who referred to Scott, a lot of successful people I know and work with have gone outside of their home base, and often they return, but they go outside of that home base to find perspective and new ways of doing things, and just grow as a person and realize that there's no one way, no perfect way. So this is a good episode. Whether you're into Ultimate and completely opposed to it or not, you might find you're on the other side once you come back out of it.
Yeah, fine, I'll go play Ultimate Frisbee with you. Anyway, enjoy the podcast. I'm going to go outside and practice chucking a Frisbee around.
Tell us then, how you've gotten to your position now in Ultimate.
Yeah, I guess the year after I stopped racing, I started doing a master's, which was kind of I don't know if there's ever a better time to be racing is when doing a master's, because you're kind of the master of your own time.
Right.
But so it was a silly time to stop racing, but at the same time it was like I kind of got enough out of racing as I could have with what I could put in while still doing an engineering degree, and I kind of had that ticking time bomb that doing my master's was a way to get some experience, because every summer was spent racing bicycles and not doing engineering work. So I was graduating with zero experience, and that's not a good thing to do in the engineering world. So
right.
I went back to do my master's, and all of a sudden had all this time on my hands because I wasn't spending 3 to 4 hours a day training. So a little bit was a nice little break from what can be a bit of a grind at that level. And then, but then I was like, I need to do something, and dabbled a little bit with softball, and that wasn't enough. And then a friend said, we're not going to be playing softball anymore. Let's go check out the sport. It's really cool. It's Ultimate Frisbee, and this was in Hamilton, at McMaster University, and it was a Hamilton Ultimate Club that was there, and it I think met Thursday nights, and started going out and fell in love with the game pretty quick. And I think the key thing was that you were playing a game, and it was fun first and foremost, but then as you could do it really, really competitively as well, and we could see players who had committed to that, where they were training specifically to be faster, stronger, swifter for ultimate. So that was pretty cool. And I think I had a fair bit of fitness that needed an outlet, and for some reason this game was it to start me off.
Right. Now, this was what age were you at sort of in this 96, 97? How old were you? You're starting a master's. What age is this at?
Oh man, that's so much math. I guess I would have been 23.
Okay, so you're not starting a master's degree at 30 or 40 or whatever, right? Like you're still, okay.
Yeah, maybe it's incredible now thinking of kids starting playing Ultimate in high school and that sort of thing. But they got years and years of experience before they even go to university playing. It's pretty exciting.
So you were playing in school, you were doing sort of pickup and stuff. How did that progress then to sort of that national and sort of I believe you're right now, your position is the head coach of the Toronto team?
Yeah, I've got a few teams that I coach, but I can tell you that story for sure.
Sure.
So I started out, you play in a typically a co-ed, so 4 men, 3 women, or 4 women, 3 men playing against another group of 7 on the other side. And I started off, we just played once a week on Thursdays, and then next thing we know, there were some really motivating people around the club, and we were traveling to tournaments in Ottawa and Montreal and Barrie and London and that sort of thing, to different tournaments around the way. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. And so pretty much my entire time here in Hamilton was playing co-ed Ultimate, which is does have a touring and competitive side to it. But when I moved to Toronto, I switched full to playing men's, and they have a kind of a tryout sequence where there's an A team and a B team and a C team and a D team, and I tried out for the A team every year, and was unsuccessful a number of years in a row, but got lots of experience on the lower teams, and kind of worked myself up to get a couple years on the A team, but always kind of at the lower end of the spectrum of players. But it was, I guess I must have started, I may have been wrong earlier, about at age 26, and then but it was once I was into the Masters age category, which it's kind of the age has been moving slowly up, but it's I think it's, if you turn 34 within a year, you're a Masters player. So it was then when I kind of clicked a little bit. I was doing all right, but I played with a team that qualified to represent Canada at the World Championships in 2008, and that was pretty exciting for me. So it was something that I had always pushed for with cycling, but never achieved. And as a result, I got pretty fired up about it. And so I would, I always trained pretty hard from what I thought, but never close to what I was doing on my bicycle. But when I was training for that World Championships, I really fired up, where I was, doing something every day to get better at my sport. doing it in a planned manner and trying to peak for that. And that year went really well, and I probably had the best year of my playing career, kind of later on than when it probably happens for everybody else.
Right.
And after that, I got asked to play on this team out of Boston, which is a bunch of it was a Masters team still, but it was a bunch of guys that everybody had looked up to. They had won a number of U.S. championships over the years, and I think kind of being physically at the top of my game, and but knowing I can't play with the young guys forever, but also getting exposure to that team, even just kind of for 2 falls, not even for 2 full years, 2 fall series I played with them. Just kind of helped me to understand the game better, and it also gave me some insight that wasn't available in Toronto. There have been some players who had gone to school in Boston and brought back some of the ideas, but I think that really contributed to my understanding of the game, and some things that we held as really important in Toronto. There were some different ideas to how that was done in Boston, and they were very successful. And so the top team, I guess over that time, I'd always, even if I was not on the top team, that I would always kind of volunteer as a training dummy, if just in the fall, training at night under the lights, often in rain and cold. The teams always didn't have the kind of requisite 14 players to be able to get some scrimmaging in, so I would continue to go out in the fall just to provide some bodies for that. So I think they realized I was hanging around, and by 2011 they asked whether I would be interested in representing them as a coach for that year. And so this was, it's called, the team's called GOAT, and actually Perry, who introduced us, Peter, he was part of the group that formed that team in 2002.
Okay.
And I went on to become coach, and I hadn't ever coached anything before, but I think it was partially the way Ultimate had worked all the time before was the players, the captain, called lines, played reps, decided on strategy changes, and they just realized that it's just too much for someone playing to have to deal with all of that. And so I was brought in to try to alleviate that from the guys playing, and also to maybe make a bit more of a system for, to be able to bring in new people each year.
Okay, so let's just to review here. So you went from playing those 2 years with Boston, and then the GOATs were at Toronto. Is it GOATs, like the animal?
Yep. GOAT. It's
yep.
Probably an acronym, but I don't even know which one's the right one.
Okay. So that was a Toronto-based team then, or was that the Boston team?
It's GOAT is a Toronto-based team, but it always had Ottawa players as well. So it was kind of a bit of an amalgamation of the kind of Canadian East top players.
Okay. And is that a Masters team, or how did that work?
No, that's an open team, and there's a few players that may have been Masters age, but that's another podcast for you. But playing with the young guys,
right.
But in general, I think this year we range from age 20 to 38 is the age group that's in here. So it's open. It can be younger than that and older than that, but that's kind of where it's been the last couple of years.
Okay. So now you're saying the sport at that highest level sort of switched from having a player coach, so to speak, versus, more traditional team sports having an actual coach on the sidelines.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, and you were sort of part of that.
Yeah, I think that they looked around and saw other teams starting to have somebody, doing that, and the most successful teams were doing that, and they realized it was a move that they had to make to compete at the higher level.
And that was around like what, 2010, or what year was this?
I think it would be at the end of the year of 2010, but 2011 was the first year that I came in as coach.
Okay,
and
that's cool. So now, how low does that go in terms of like having a coach? Like, you wouldn't see that in the Thursday night level you started at, I assume, but like, does that start pretty much once you start going to those tournament teams? You would mostly see someone acting as the coach.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting now that there's been a real push. Like, juniors teams always had coaches, but there's been a real push in the Toronto scene, and they have some really top coaches, and so they're not only developing players, but those top coaches are developing other coaches at the junior level here in Toronto, and I'm sure it happens in Ottawa and Vancouver as well. Some of the bigger centers, and sorry, I shouldn't drop out Winnipeg. That's a massive center for junior development. So junior teams travel to tournaments as well, and they're really got some fantastic coaching now. So for me, most of the players that are on the teams that I'm working with, the veterans kind of grew up without a coach, and are from 2011 on, dealt with that different situation. But what's great is now all the juniors come in, and not only do they really know how to play Ultimate because they've been taught how to do so at a high level and with some systems, but they're also used to having a coach telling them who's playing and what's going on, and how they should train and when they should train, and things like that. So there's a real interesting switch. In I don't know how many years, 5-10 years, it's going to be all players who've kind of grown up playing competitive Ultimate through their junior careers, and being coached as well. So it's pretty exciting changes for the sport.
Yeah, that's really cool. Once you start seeing a sport, getting a grassroots sort of program, as you say, you can definitely anticipate that the sport's going to be at a crazy level once you have these kids who have that 10 years of experience or whatever, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And certainly adding coaching to that equation is a next level too, right? Before it wouldn't, as you say, the captain player wouldn't be able to give a lot of feedback to the other. But when you have someone whose full-time job is to give that feedback and stuff, between shifts, then you start getting really rapid and really high-end progression.
Yeah, 100%. It's we're seeing it where players are stepping into our team, and not just not just being a part of the team, but leading the team, or really exciting athletic players, but also we don't have to develop them for 2 or 3 years. They're stepping right in and making a big difference in games, and we're super appreciative of the effort of our friends and co-players over the years who've really concentrated a bunch of their time on developing the junior players. It's going to make Toronto and Canada a good place to play for a long time.
Right. Okay. So let's drill in then on, can you give me, a relatively concise description of what Ultimate Frisbee is?
Yeah, sure. I guess that's an important part of the deal. It's so Ultimate is a sport, and I think the number one thing that sets it apart from other sports is spirit of the game. In general, save for the pro leagues, it's played without a referee, and there's a number of requirements of that is of all the players, and that's a knowledge of the rules, but also application of what we call spirit of the game, and that's where there's an implicit assumption that no one will cheat to gain unfair advantage. So important when you show up is to know the rules, but also is to understand that it's not like basketball when you foul on purpose to stop somebody from scoring. That's just not part of the game. And so that's something that's always interesting when we bring players in from other sports. And some people, run away from other sports or are not interested in other sports because of that, and that's what really draws them to Ultimate. And then other players come into Ultimate and have a bit of trouble with figuring out how to play, aggressive sport without, crossing that line. But how the game works out, it's a non-contact sport, and it's typically played on a field 70 yards wide, long on the actual playing surface, and 40 yards wide, and then 20 to 25 yards depending on the size of the field. So in general, what we do normally is play on a soccer field. We usually are able to fit 2 fields, especially in pickup leagues. We definitely do that. It's always exciting when you get a proper space to play and you've got a full dimension field. It doesn't happen at all tournaments, and certainly not during a pickup. Sometimes it's a little shorter, a little not as wide. But so the object of the game is to it starts off with one group of 7 lined up at one end of the field, and another group of 7 lined up at the other, kind of at the front of an end zone that's 20 yards deep. Mm-hmm. And one team throws it to the other team, and then after that it's kind of game on. And the game involves the offensive team, the one that's just received the disc, to pass the disc from player to player all the way up the field, and the goal of which is to throw the disc to a player that's in the end zone. So end zone, just like rugby or American football, but you don't run with the disc ever. So if you do catch the disc, you have a couple steps to slow down, but after that you plant your foot just like in basketball, and then you have 10 seconds to throw it to a teammate. So I think that kind of wraps it all up, but I always like to say it's a little bit like basketball because of the pivot foot. Mm-hmm. It's like American football or football, where you're trying to score into an end zone. And then I think the final little bit of it is it's kind of like soccer, where as soon as the disc hits the ground or there's a turnover or an interception, there's no stoppage where, the offense comes off and the defense goes on. The game just continues on. So you may be in a highly advantageous position where you're, all the way down in the end zone, free, and nobody's covering you. But then there's a turnover, and suddenly your great position becomes a disadvantage where you have to sprint down the field to catch and put try to either block a pass to your opponent, or what we call marking, where you stand close to your opponent and you can influence the direction that they can throw to, and that helps your downfield defenders to where they can position themselves to put themselves between the player and a thrown disc.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a
good...
So
I'm still just questions.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think that's a great way to explain it. I think that's relatively clear in terms of the basic rules and what Ultimate is. Like, I think the fact that you can't run with the disc is often sort of overlooked, but once you sort of get that in your head, then, okay, it's like basketball without dribbling type thing. Yeah, so from there, then, what I'm wondering is, how does someone then, okay, we understand the game, that sounds attractive. I like for me, the not having the, I'm trying to think what it's called in soccer when someone, intentionally falls and, what's that called? I'm trying to think of when they take, I can't think of what it's called. You know what I mean,
Like
though, right?
like a dive?
A dive. That's the word I'm looking for. So
yeah.
you can't dive in this, and I sort of like that it's sort of built on the spirit of the game. I like that term. So if this is sounding attractive to people, like, where do you start? You know, how would you recommend someone gets going in the sport?
Yeah, it's here in Toronto and in lots of major centers. There's a club in Toronto. It's called the Toronto Ultimate Club, but you know they're all over, and these usually they have, you know, partially organized pickup games, and then they also have leagues. There's also like Toronto Sport and Social Club, which does leagues as well. And I think, you know, getting out and playing is a lot of fun. And when you're in a league, it's, you know, it's about the game. Everybody wants to play and do well, but it's also about the camaraderie and, you know, having fun after the game as well. And that kind of adds to everybody's experience. But you know, in the general sense, if you want to play, you need to find a bunch of people to play. It's not that expensive in that, you know, maybe you need some soccer cleats or football cleats and some cones to make a field and enough space to play. But it's playing in kind of an organized league allows you to, you know, that's a good start to progressing. And, you know, as you see better players play, you get to kind of emulate the moves or the throws that they're making, and then build up from there. So, you know, that's one aspect of how to start. But I think everybody, you know, when you're starting, you know, being able to throw the disc is a pretty key part of the game. It's not like football where it's, you know, one guy's throwing the ball and, you know, there might be multiple people catching it. With Ultimate, you've got a lot of quarterbacks on the field, and as soon as you catch the disc, you instantly become the quarterback, and you're going to want to have a few different throws, or at least some confidence in your throws to start out the game. So I would say that's, you know, we do, as part of the Toronto Rush, the team that I'm involved in, we do a lot of outreach where it's learn to play sessions, or, you know, learn to play at a higher level sessions, and almost all of it is you know, some sort of explanation on, you know, gaining confidence in your throws, and that would be the first step that you can do individually before you even head out to a league game or to a pickup game.
So that would be where you would probably start someone, you know, even a first practice if someone was coming out maybe to like a pickup league, or, you know, it would be sort of just play and catch essentially with a Frisbee?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. You can do it by yourself. It's not very rewarding, but you can, you know, if you have one more discs and a target like a soccer net, or maybe even better like a lacrosse net, a bit smaller, and just practice, you know, throwing in like into that, where you would have, you know, some confidence that, you know, when you throw, it's going to go where you want it to go.
Right. What about like a Frisbee golf? Is that sort of like taboo to talk about Frisbee golf? I didn't know if there was like
no way.
No, it's cool. Okay.
It's so much fun. I think there's a little bit about how people throw, but, you know, there's some guys on our team now that you can tell they played a bunch of Frisbee golf because they can launch the disc, and they just in their mechanics and in how they, you know, for the guys who can throw really far, that comes out of you as part of disc golf, because you're always trying to throw that drive as close to the pin as you can. But yeah, that's a lot of fun. I think that kind of leads to the first thing you see when you then start playing games is figuring out how to throw to someone who's newer. So right. If you've spent all your time practicing, you know, throwing to a soccer net or to a disc golf hole, you probably got the throwing mechanics now down, and then it's just teaching yourself the, athleticism of, making that quick calculation of where you need to throw the disc based on the direction and how fast a person is moving. And that's kind of the, maybe one of the next level things that you see when you see people start to play Ultimate is they do have the throws and are capable of the throws, but it takes some repetition to do those calculations in your head of where you need to put the disc that's far enough ahead of somebody that the defense doesn't have a play on it, but not too far that they can't catch up to it.
Right. So now we like to sort of find out, the first time someone goes and does a sport, there's often, in cycling, I use that as an example, if you have a helmet and, the basic gear, you're going to feel more comfortable going out to like a group ride or something your first time, right? So with Frisbee, I'm going out to co-ed, say, this Thursday, how should I dress? Is there anything that would make me, fit in and feel more comfortable?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think people are pretty lax on it now, but there was a time when, you wanted to have, whatever, a dry fit shirt and a kind of longer shorts is probably the norm. But I think all those have been broken down. I remember us watching footage of the 1991, I think, World Championships that were played in Toronto, and all those guys with their long hair and short shorts were pretty fun to watch. So not many people show up with kind of the running shorts. I know the kind of with the kind of seam up the side. In more kind of basketball shorts is what most people wear. But after that, shirts wise, there's people who wear kind of the bro tank tops, or dry fit shirts, or whatever, just regular t-shirts. But I think whenever you go to Ultimate, the key thing, you have to bring 4 things. You have to bring maybe 5. So cleats are good if you want to play, and if everybody else is in cleats and you just bring regular shoes, you're going to be disappointed because they're going to be able to change directions lots faster than you. You're going to want a water bottle because you're probably going to sweat and need to replace some of those fluids. A disc, because it sucks when everybody shows up to play and nobody's brought a disc. And then you need a light jersey and a dark jersey, and that way it's easy to divide up the teams, whether you be a league or a pickup. It's lights versus darks, and that's the way it is. And highly frowned upon is a gray jersey, because it's always so confusing which team you're on.
Right. Okay. The cleats then, like, would I just get a soccer cleat? Does that really matter?
I think lots of people use soccer cleats. Most of the players that I coach or when I play, there's kind of, I guess there would be football receiver or cornerback cleats, and the only difference that I can tell is they have a toe cleat, a cleat like right on the toe, and so soccer cleats don't have that, so you can kind of dig underneath the ball and control the ball better on underneath your toe. But that's the one difference that I've seen. But there's lots of successful players that have played in soccer cleats, so I think anything that would give you stability, you'll be fine. Like, I certainly wouldn't say that you need to if you have soccer cleats already, that you'd have to go out and buy something new to play Ultimate.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Those are some really good things. I think the jerseys and the disc and the shoes, that's all stuff that I think, if you showed up just with your street clothes, you, again, would feel a little out of place and not be a, easy integration into the weekly practice, right? So
yeah, I think the games out on the quad or whatever at university, you can show up in whatever and have a lot of fun. But if people are going specifically out to play Frisbee there or Ultimate, they're going to probably wear cleats and seeing people slide around without those cleats it looks like no fun.
Yeah, I think it's good. If as much as you can. This sounds fairly easy. Most people would have a lot of this stuff already, right? So I think when you can show up and just not seem like a complete beginner, it's just going to help that first time being more comfortable and maybe making a little bit more gains in the important stuff, like actually throwing and catching a Frisbee, right? I'm wondering here, can you describe, what's the Frisbee? Is there the disc, I should say? There's obviously a disc specific to Ultimate versus, say, even Frisbee golf, or the cheap Frisbee I'd buy at the dollar store or something.
Yeah, the disc. There's a couple different companies. The one that we use predominantly is made by Discraft, and what you find different slightly is the mold that's used to make the Frisbee and or the disc. The key thing for Ultimate, anyways, is that it's 175 grams, and there's maybe 2 or 3 different companies that have been approved as authorized disc suppliers. In general, people will want to use the same disc that they practice with, so that they the different shapes fly a little bit differently, and so strong throwers will notice a big difference quickly. But I think in Canada, MEC sells the kind of Ultimate disc, and you can you often get one when you join a league, or you can buy them at tournaments and that sort of thing. And so it's a little bit bigger than the kind of dollar store Frisbee, and it's a lot heavier, and that heaviness will blow you away if you're used to throwing that dollar store Frisbee, or the one that is a giveaway at whatever parade or industry meeting type thing. The heaviness will allow you to throw in wind and for it to be much more stable, and then I think easier to catch as well, but I don't have a good explanation for why, but it's probably because it's just more predictable in its path.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. What would you expect to pay for a certified authorized Frisbee?
I think it's somewhere between $12 and $20, and all depends on. I can't even remember. I think we sell them at the Toronto Rush. They might be $15, and sometimes depending on what people have been able to buy them for, and to get them printed with a neat logo on and resell them, you might be able to get them for less or more than that. I know typically when we're doing fundraising for Team Canada this past year, we aim to sell them for $20 in order to help defray some costs from the team heading that went to London this past summer. So
right,
that kind of 12 to 20 I think is typical.
Okay. What about, let's talk here a little bit about just the common mistakes when you're working with someone who's just starting out in Ultimate specifically. What is sort of the first sort of stumbling block that would again maybe differentiate a beginner from an intermediate player?
Yeah, I think one thing I see, if you kind of you've taught throwing and people see the throwing, and we talked a bit about it, is the ability to throw to moving targets, both moving towards you, away from you, and kind of across your vision. But then some other things that I see quite a bit with early players is, when the disc hits the ground, people are really excited to pick up the disc, and they rush over, and sometimes you see 2 people rushing to the disc at the same time, and not fighting for the disc, but one person's disappointed because they didn't get there quite as quickly as the other, and they pick it up, and they're so concentrated on picking up the disc that they don't go there with a plan of where they're going to throw it, or who they're going to throw it to, or some understanding of the space that's going to be around them, or who might be in advantageous position. And yeah, I think I saw that quite a bit on some recent beginner games that I was watching. And we as much as you try to stop people and say, hey, you know what, you can walk to the disc a little slower. You can designate someone who's going to pick up the disc, and so that's probably the key one. That's maybe easy to think about. And then the next one is just because at when the coach level and the level that I play at and coach at right now is people understand that if everybody's cutting for the disc at the same time, it's you're not going to be successful. And that's the one thing as beginners, you've got a lot of excited people. You've just been doing some drills, and now it's finally time to play. Is that sometimes it's just as easy to say two people to say, okay, I'm going to cut first, and you cut second for me. And by cut, I mean run in one direction and then change your direction to try to lose your defender. If you can do that, you can create a lot more space to make sure that you have open throwing lanes and kind of more successful advancing of the disc through passes. And so those are two things that I noticed quite a bit with a beginner group that I worked with a couple of weeks ago.
Right. I think that's great. I mean, that thinking ahead and sort of linking skills together, I think would be a good general description of beginner versus intermediate. So that's good. Is there a way that you is that just time in the sport playing, do you think, that does that, or is it more that, as you say, people are rushing to pick up a disc that no one else is going to pick up, they're entitled to pick up that disc no matter how fast they get to it? Is that the mistake that you're seeing?
It just might be between the team, between members on the same team, where when the disc hits the ground, there's 7 players on the team that are entitled to pick up the disc.
Oh, okay.
If everybody runs to pick up the disc, whoever does pick it up, they're going to be looking at 7 offensive players kind of within 3 to 10 feet of them, and then 7 defensive players making it very difficult to complete a pass.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, we say Timbit soccer here in Canada, where the ball's over here and so are all of the players.
I was going to say hockey's like that too. I remember watching cousins or whatever playing hockey, and it's just they're all in the corner together, all 10 players on the ice are all, sometimes the goalie too are in the corner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's what comes with first watching sports, and so kids who've maybe had a chance to watch the Toronto Rush play, or the Sixers, which is the women's team, or GOAT, they can see that they're making space is probably the most important part of the game at the higher level, so that you can't have one person covering 2 people or what have you, and that's a really key part of going from intermediate to expert is starting to do that. But I think it's a little bit about just experience, but it's also about getting some guidance from some senior or expert players, however you want to say it, where they're going to assign a couple people and say, hey, you're going to stand in this position, and you're going to keep your person busy, but you're probably not going to get the disc this point. But it's going to be very important that you do that really well, and that will give these 2 people a chance to have more space to, pass the disc between them.
Right. Are there sports that transfer well to Frisbee? I mean, you've come from cycling, but is there, do you see any trend, hockey players coming? You mentioned the basketball players or soccer players getting sick of the rules, or the referees or whatever. Is there a trend that you see, a clustering of athletes from a certain sport?
Yeah, certainly cycling is not one. We didn't learn a lot of running. I guess triathlete or even mountain bikers probably do a lot, but road and velodrome, could move in a straight direction on a bike, no problem, but changing directions wasn't key.
No.
Wasn't easy, but certainly some sports that I think have been fantastic, like soccer for sure. Both women and men who I know have come from a soccer background, partially because they understand team sports. They understand listening to the coach or listening to their leader and following through on strategy and approaches. But it's also the movement, the footwork that you learn in soccer, and keeping your weight above your center of gravity and your legs in a manner that you can change direction quickly, I think are probably pretty key. Tennis has actually been a good one. I know some good players that play tennis that seem to also be good. I think I think the lateral movement and the ability to change direction quickly and to react quickly. So I think it's typically around the footwork and not maybe the racket work as much. And where I think is closer to what the arm motions is more, I don't know about badminton too much, but squash, that kind of flicking of the wrist that happens in squash is, I think squash that I play, maybe not at the high levels, I don't know, is closer to the what makes a good thrower. And I've known some good players, good handlers who play squash, and they seem to have a good control of the disc.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. The other one I wanted to do, you talked a little bit about, going somewhere else to find success, to find different ideas, to sort of have your mind open, which is something actually that Perry, who introduced us, who's one of my coaching clients, he is someone who I often reference who's, had great success in his life, but he's done he was in France for school and then out working in BC and stuff. And so someone who I'm like, you sort of have to get out of your own world, where you grew up to find success and sort of that higher level thinking. So when you went down to Boston, is there something specifically that sticks out as your sort of paradigm shift or thing that's made you a better coach in because of that experience?
I think there's a few things, and I remember always in Toronto and maybe in Canada in general, it's a lot of concentration on the pull play and what happens after. But by pull play, is when the one team throws to the other. Is that there's a pretty scripted movement of how people move after the disc comes down, and we would have reams and lots of different ones that we would run through, and it was pretty exciting, memorizing them and running them through, and when they worked really well, that was pretty exciting. But I noticed in the Boston team is that, the pull play was pretty basic, kind of the same thing each time, and then, how people moved was all with reaction to the reaction to what the defense was doing, which I think was good for me. And then the other thing was the kind of keep it simple aspect of it was that there were some things that I don't know. I looked at they would publish the playbook from whatever 15 or 10 years before, and it's like it's the same thing. Is that they've had a lot of success with just doing really simple things, but doing it really well and really concentrating on the. I think the key was the value of the disc and not taking unnecessary risks with the disc and being more possession oriented, where the big throws are pretty exciting, but they also with the distance that you throw, there's also a possibility of the wind catching it or being a slightly off angle, or a defender being able to catch it up. That they were really into just hitting the next open player and not being possession oriented, and I think that kind of opened up my eyes to just a different approach and, a bit more simple approach to the game.
Okay. I think that's good. It's funny, we always want it to be some new crazy move or something, but it's so often, the best coaches, I was just talking to a golf coach this morning for another episode, and that's essentially it. It's not, huge massive drives or, crazy putts or anything like that, right? It's just consistency and, working on that, doing those basics really, really well.
Yeah, well, one key I remember was that in Toronto we always called it no unders defense, and so we talk about quadrants of the person and which area you can influence and which area you have to hope that the person marking the disc influences, and we always try to be underneath our guys and stop the easy underpass. And then give up. We would give up a small advantage on the deep puck throws, but we would aim to catch those up with our legs. And when I showed up with the Boston team, they're like, that's not how we do it. You're like they put me in the entire other quadrant on the backside of the person. There you have the person in your sights, but you also see where the Frisbee is and you see what's going on a little bit more. And I don't know, it worked out really well for me. I played ball for them and got a whole pile of defensive stops, and it was like, wow, this is kind of interesting. Small change in position, different view of where the disc is, and lots of success. Maybe we should bring that one day to Toronto.
Right. Yeah, and that's like almost a complete paradigm shift, right? Where it's what you thought was the only way or the best way, you look at almost the complete opposite, and, oh wow, that works too, right? And
Yeah, and I think from a coaching perspective, I've always been pushing to have more than one look and, more than one ability. You don't want to show up against a team. And I think the GOAT team of old, they knew exactly what was coming out at them every single time. It would be man D, no under D, and as a result, they would be able to, find success against that when they needed to, because they knew kind of what our system was. And so over the past few years, we've been trying to make sure that we were more unpredictable in what we were bringing to the table, both offensively and defensively.
That's awesome. I think there's lots there. I think we covered the basics as far as the discs and the game, and sort of some rough stuff as far as where people can find it. Now you provided me with you have a Twitter, Scott, is that right?
Yeah, it's just my own one. It's a little bit ultimate, a little bit of organization, and who knows what else. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll include that in the show notes, but what is that Twitter address again, just so we have it on the audio too?
Oh yeah, it's Shooter, SHOOTER, which is just a nickname, _TO.
Okay, perfect. And I have the club there for Toronto, but would you say, what's the best website if someone was interested in some of that Toronto-based Ultimate stuff?
Yeah, it's www.tuc.org. And that's the Toronto Ultimate Club in Toronto, where many people get their start.
As always, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Please let us know what you thought about it, how it's impacted you or changed the way you're training. You can let us know in the comments over at consummateathlete.com, or you could let us know over Twitter at Molly J. Herford and at Peter Glassford. And of course, if you liked the episode, please leave us a review over in iTunes. That would be super helpful. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great week, and we will see you next time.